like to ask you, Mr. Muthiah, some questions about Madras city and how the history of the hotels fit into the history of the city.
Well, Stig, as you know, Madras is a comparatively new city. It is only about 350 years old. It was a city founded in the middle of nowhere and which later took in a lot of villages which surrounded it. The actual place where the city began is what is now called Fort St. George, which at that time was only a 3-mile stretch of sand where there was nothing except one fisherman's village. So when the city developed, all the roads led out of the city, out of the fort. That was the central core. Now, as I said, there was very little settlement here. It was Fort St. George was established by the British, and they really brought in settlers from other parts of the what later became the Madras Presidency, to become the weavers and dyers and washers of cloth which they were going to manufacture. These weavers and all were settled in what was called an Indian town, which was just to the north of Fort St. George. That Indian town lasted in that position, and the position I'm talking of is now where the High Court is. That was the first Indian town, and that lasted up to about 1750. After 1750, the British wiped out that Indian town so that they will have a clean field of fire for their soldiers in Fort St. George. This happened after the French had defeated the British and had occupied Fort St. George. So since they wanted this clean field of fire, they destroyed the old Indian town and established a new Indian town across what they called Esplanade Road. And that Indian town, which they called Black Town, is what later became Georgetown after George V visited India. So the earliest Indian settlement in terms of the modern concept of Madras was in the Georgetown area. And this is why any kind of hoteliering, development, everything took place in the Georgetown area. Now, when the British decided that they were no longer had to live under the protection of the fort and they could live in more comfort, they began moving around along the main roads which they had developed leading out of the fort. And the first main road which was developed was the road to St. Thomas Mount, which was where they used to go for holiday weekends and shooting and things like that. And that road is what we call Mount Road. Now, if you look at a map, in the original stage, this was where Fort St. George was founded, and this was all that there was in this area. In fact, the next kind of living area was Mylapore here. And there was some settlement here, and there were little bits of settlement here. But actually, most of it was unsettled, and this was where the fort was established. Naturally, all the roads which later developed led out of the fort. So you have the road south, the road north. This was the road to the mount. This was the road to the mount. This was the road to Poonamali, which was another fortress area. And this was the road which went up into Andhra. So all the roads radiated out of the fort. When development began, the first Indian settlers were established in this area and later moved back to this area, and this is what is now Georgetown today. The earliest settlement was just in this area. Then they cleaned this out and established this Indian town. But what became the road of the British was the Mount Road. And all development first took place on either side of Mount Road. After that, the next development took place on either side of Poonamali Road. So you find a lot of British names in the Egmo area and things like that, Egmo, Vepri and all. You find most of the roads are named after the British as such. So the basic British development was here. The Indian development was up here, basically. So when you started Udupi Hotels and things like that, it was always in this area, and to be allowed into this area was a great concession at the time Krishna Vilas was established. There are two things. The original Woodlands Hotel was a Georgetown hotel. When Krishna Rao started, and you've already got his story going, Krishna Rao established the first Woodlands Hotel in Georgetown. So he was catering to the population. When he decided to move out of Georgetown, where he moved out was to Mount Road and he moved to Krishna Vilas. When he decided he's moving into what this area which is called the Great Chaudhry Plain, which was the posh area, when he decided he wanted to move in here, he moved into what is now the Royapeta Woodlands. And it was moved in there not as a restaurant, but as a genuine hotel. It was meant for accommodation purposes, and in other words, his hotel was going to be, his restaurant was going to be Krishna Vilas, and right next to that, there was a second restaurant also open now in just opposite what is the Muhammad Ibrahim building. Just there was a second restaurant. Then his hotel, which is what he was really aiming at, his ambition was to become a hotelier and not so much a restaurateur, which is what he started out with, was this Royapeta hotel. When they ran into problems with the ownership on the Royapeta hotel, he bought this property on Chamiers Road, not Chamiers Road, on Cathedral Road, where Woodlands now exists as a hotel. It was a house called the Laurels. And that stretch at that time was where all the top Indians lived. They lived on Cathedral Road and Dr. Radhakrishnan Road and things like that, Elliott's Road, Elliott's Road. That was where the top Mylapore Brahmin families used to live.
Mostly Brahmins.
Mostly Brahmins.
And mostly Tamil Brahmins.
Mostly Brahmins.
Like
any Englishman who had enough money bought himself a house or built himself a house covered with, surrounded by acres of garden. And we got what was then known as garden houses in Madras, and Madras became famous for its garden houses. You'll just find a house in the middle, which might take up maybe about half an acre of space, but you can find 30 to 40 acres of garden space around it, and they live in this kind of luxury. This was a concept which stuck with the Indians later on, and the concept of having greenery was a very strong concept. Now, the fact, it's a curious fact that in Madras, most people walking around the streets of Madras do not believe that we are a green city. But you go up to the top of St. Thomas Mount and look down at Madras, and you won't believe there can be a city as green as this. But the entire city is covered with green of this type. And there is this consciousness, even if you have a small house here, you still try to grow something. And in lots of ways, I mean, though they talk of Bangalore as the garden city and all, you don't get this kind of green anywhere.
First question I want to ask you is how come that you entered the hotel business, though at that time you were already a qualified medical practitioner?
That is a very simple question for me to answer, is to take my people to the hotel and make them eat and pay for it. I never did anything without paying for what I took. And Mr. Sitaram Rao started giving me the work on the 1st of April. Then on the 8th of April, he was leaving for Ooty, because in Ooty we had big business, and the business in Ooty is between April and June or July. So he gave me a chance after 1 week working here. He told me, Mr. Anand Rao, I am going away. I said, I don't know anything about the hotel industry. If somebody comes and asks me a question, what shall I do? He said, there is a telephone, you can use the telephone. And I decided within myself that if I use the telephone, that will be bad for me. That shows my inefficiency, that I cannot handle a job which has been entrusted to me. So I took my own decision, and God was in favor of the decision. And luckily we have done well.
What is the philosophy or the principles which distinguish this chain from other hotels?
I can tell you, Mr. Sitaram Rao was a great believer in religion. And every place where he has gone, he has put religious sculptures everywhere, including in this place. There is a puja room just outside, and wherever there are other places. And whenever he believed in the Swamijis that are available in Udupi. There are 8 Swamijis. The Swamijis do work doing puja to God once in 2 years. After 2 years, that Swamiji goes, the next Swamiji comes. Like that it goes on until all the 8 people have finished their term of 2 years. After that it goes on. And there is the feeling in many people that you come and stay in Dasaprakash, the religious atmosphere that goes in here helps them in their business.
I can ask you one thing in this connection. See, I have seen in different parts of Madras these Kalyan Mantapas where weddings are held. And I know you also have a Kalyan Mantapa in connection with the hotel, a little bit down the opposite road. Now, was that one of the first Kalyan Mantapas in Madras?
It was not one of the first Kalyan Mantapa, but it was one of the many Kalyan Mantapas in Madras. You see, in Kalyan Mantapa, many things are necessary. some accommodation for the bride and bridegroom must be necessary. There must be sufficient accommodation to feed the people. Because here they give the morning breakfast, then they give the lunch, then the evening tea and the night dinner. All this is done by the people who are organizing these parties. And this has become in the south, it has become a great habit of having this Kalyana Mandapam. You don't see this sort of a thing in northern India. You see, this is typically South Indian and the people believe in it. You know, everything depends on the people's belief in it. If they don't believe, it doesn't come.
Mr. Ramnarai, you have told me that most of the Udupi hotels, or rather practically all Udupi hotels, they are not serving real Udupi food. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, like they are serving basically South Indian items. It's not Udupi fare. Like idli, dosa, it's you get all over, and you get in Tamil Nadu, you get it in all over South India. But what we serve, something like patroda, kadubu or kaludijitna kulla, is basically from South Canara, from Udupi. You don't get it in any other place. And we have introduced, since we felt we are not doing justice to an Udupi hotel, we have kept a name, the hotel's name is Udupi Home, the restaurant name is Muthiah, and we are not serving any Udupi item. So that's the reason we have introduced those items.
When did you introduce these items?
For the past 1 year.
Past 1 year. And which type of people come to have lunch and dinner in your restaurant?
Like breakfast time is from the nearby vicinity. Like they haven't prepared anything or something like that. They come have a idli or some small item and they go. Lunch is basically the office goers from the nearby office, from MMDA building, from Students Complex. They want to have a quick meal and get back to office. Then evening you get the boys and girls, couples, it's a different crowd. Night, children, school kids. Night it's basically families. Like we get North Indians and South Indians, but predominantly North Indians.
Will some of the North Indian people also be able to get North Indian food in Muthiah restaurant?
We have tandoori items.
You have tandoori items also?
But everything in vegetarian. And specifically we prepare for Jain people without onions and garlic.
I think your family has started the hotel and the restaurant.
Yeah,
Was it your father or?
No, it's my father's elder brother, Mr. K. Shamagat. He's no more. He started the whole place.
And when was that approximately?
40 years back.
40 years back. As a hotel and then also as a restaurant?
Yeah, first there was only the restaurant part of it. Then the restaurant was shifted to where Muthiah is. And we started the lodging the other side. Then we, like in 1975, we closed the restaurant for about 5 years. And then we renovated it and brought it out as an AC restaurant. We closed it because of we didn't get along with the government very well. They introduced the Janata system where we'll have to give meals for 1 rupee.
Really?
It was basically outrageous. Yeah, it was outrageous, hilarious. We told like we're not going to do business. It's not business. So we closed it. And when even the government didn't last long.
When that was during the Janata government?
Janata government. Then in 1979 when Indira Gandhi came back, we also came back. And we started it as an exclusive vegetarian restaurant.
These items, do you have a special cook to prepare these items?
Yeah, we have a special cook. He's come from Udupi. Like he was here doing cooking for our social functions. Then we needed a cook for our Udupi fair. We brought him to Muthiah. And now he does only Udupi items. We don't give him any other work like doing South Indian or North Indian items.
I see.
Because there may be some influence of that. Maybe it will be better, but it won't be authentic.
May I ask you one more question regarding the food?
Yeah.
These different items,
Yeah.
Udupi items, the Udupi fare,
Yeah.
each of them are served separately, but you also serve several of them together on a plate or a thali. Now, why do you do that?
No, actually, if you go for any of our weddings, you get all these items in the wedding fair. Like you get a holy as a sweet, you get a kukurai sainam as a drink, you get kadubu as a light eat, you get patroda, little of patroda, then you get guliyappas. Like many things come in a wedding, but it's extravagant stuff. Like only if in a wedding they do. Like other items are tiffin items. A guliyappa in the evenings your mom will do for you. And we gobble up something like 10 to 15. So like that's how the idea came about. The evening we used to eat and we used to hog. And we were wondering like when we like it, even others will like it. And then this thing came of a Udupi restaurant not serving Udupi dishes. So we had to introduce it.
And then you have put small samples of all these different dishes on the thali.
In the thali.
Yeah.
You literally get something like 15 to 20 items.
I see.
I think 15 or slightly up or below that.
And then the idea is that later on when you have got to know these different
how
dishes,
each item tastes, you will individually order that item. Like now you have taken a guliyappa.
yes.
Like you like the taste. Next time you tell I want a plate of guliyappa. Maybe like kalli jitna gulla you may not prefer much.
Okay, then one will exclude
Yeah,
that. And then one
something
can
like
make
that.
one's own choice.
Yeah, you have a choice. Like we don't like to force it upon the customer.
There were large numbers of Indians who might be wealthy but did not have the Western upbringing. I'm talking of people like zamindars and landowners and things like that. So for them there was a need to have a hotel which could cater to their things, and that's how the first Woodlands Hotel started, to meet that. Previous to that, basically hoteliering was devoted to the chowdhuries. If somebody came here, he'd go to a temple chowdhury, or the family had a chowdhury or something like that, and they'd go to that temple.
What is a chowdhury?
A chowdhury is a free rest house run by a trust or for a community. Like Chettiars have 3 or 4 chowdhuries in Madras. And any Chettiar can go there and get 3 meals a day and live free of cost. It might not be the most comfortable living, but you get a good meal and you get a mat to sleep on, and there's always somebody who can shout to bring you water for a bath and things like that. That is the level of operation. Now that's what most communities had, these chowdhuries in Madras. A lot of temples had these things. Individual families also had them. So they would come to these to stay. But in terms of Eastern hoteliering, there was no facility till, or no upper class facility till Woodlands started up at prior to that. And that made a lot of difference from that. There were, of course, the clubs. A lot of people, there were clubs. I mean, like Cosmopolitan Club and Presidency Club and things, which are the older clubs, which admitted Indians as members. Most of them had rooms where a lot of the upper class Indians stayed who did not want to go into the Western style luxury. But even these clubs, there was an overlay of Western, veneer of Westernization in most of these clubs. So it was really the Woodlands which was really the first Indian concept.
Maybe I'll try to draw this together. I may be wrong in my conclusions, but say you had the big British style or international style hotels, and then the Woodlands came. So for some there would be a choice, to some extent it would be a situation of competition, but the competition, at least in the long run, would also be between the Woodlands, though it started from its very inception on a pretty high economic level, but as it expanded its operations and there's so many other followers, they actually have taken over the market of these chowdhuries. Isn't it? Because nowadays, how many people who come to Madras will stay in a chowdhury? Very few. Instead, there are umpteen small hotels where they can stay, and these are sort of all results of this
Woodlands explosion.
Yeah,
what Woodlands started.
So that is really the market which in the long run they have taken, rather maybe than entering into direct competition
with the upper class market.
With the upper class.
Certainly. What they really did was take the chowdhury market. That's basically what they